All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Quinton Moorhead. I'm the National Account Manager of Top Crop Manager and Potatoes in Canada magazine. I'm joined today by Stuart Persson, Senior Vice President of MMP's Ag Services, located in the Edmonton office. Stuart has more than 25 years of experience in agriculture, specializing in the grain industry. Passionate about the industry, he grew up on a grain farm and continues to participate as a producer himself. This experience and knowledge allows Stuart to relate firsthand to what Canadian agriculture producers face in their operations and gives him great insight into how to help producers overcome challenges and achieve their goals. Stuart works with many agriculture producers, associations, and other industry stakeholders on a daily basis, providing advice into complex issues that affect the industry. He has extensive experience as an agriculture business advisor with MMP and has helped clients from coast to coast. He's also a member of the Canadian Association of Farm Advisors. Stuart earned his Bachelor of Commerce degree with distinction from the University of Saskatchewan in 2000. He's a chartered professional accountant, qualifying as a chartered accountant in 2003. During today's session, Stuart and I will discuss using data in ag, touching on topics such as digitization and collection of financial and operational data, as well as big picture and practical application. Thanks for MMP for sponsoring our session today. MMP is a leading national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm for Canada's agriculture industry. We have invested more time and resources into understanding agriculture than any other firm, with more than 18,000 agriculture clients and a team of more than 600 agriculture specialists. MMP delivers a diverse suite of services to protect farmers and maximize results. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees and registrants approximately 24 hours after our live broadcast. The session is scheduled to run for approximately 45 minutes to an hour. Stuart and I will speak for about 45 minutes, then following the presentation, we'll open the floor for questions. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them in the questions tab on the GoToWebinar panel of your computer screen. Finally, the webinar has been approved for 1 CCA CEU in professional development. Further instructions for submission will follow the presentation. So that's all I've got right now, so we can just get into it. So thanks for joining us, Stuart. First thing we wanted to talk about was cloud accounting. What is it, and what does the conversion process look like?
Thanks, Quinton. So maybe I'll just give a brief overview of cloud accounting, and then we'll get into your first poll question there. So really what cloud accounting is it's taking your bookkeeping systems off of your desktop and putting them onto the cloud, so they're in a format that can be shared with numerous users. You know, if you're doing your record keeping and you want your accountant or your lender or someone like that to be able to see an update set of books, you can absolutely have multiple people being able to see that all at once. So no different than several other things that have migrated onto the cloud. With anybody working in an office environment now, there's a lot of your systems will be on the cloud so that multiple people can see them. This is the same idea with your accounting system being moved onto a cloud-based platform so that it's live and other people can see it and maybe help you with it or access the data as it's being generated. The conversion. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Quinton.
Keep going. I was just going to say we got a little poll here, so maybe I'll just launch that and we can
sure.
get some answers from the crowd here. So I'm going to pull up this. So everyone should see a poll on their screen now, so you can just answer yes, no, or I'm in the process. And once we get some answers from everybody, we can kind of go over the results here. Let's give everyone a few more seconds here to get some answers in. About 50% voted so far. Okay. Here we are again. So I'll pull up the results here and then we can take a peek at them. So about 71% are at no right now, 21 yes, and 7 are in the process.
So yeah, that's that would probably be what I would have expected. At 21%, I think that's actually pretty good. from what we're seeing in the accounting side. I think in Canada, it's just kind of getting going. I think it's similar in the United States, where it's still in early days in the transition to cloud accounting. If you look at other countries like Australia and New Zealand, for example, the conversion rate is quite a bit higher from my understanding. So they've been at this a little longer, maybe than some of us, well, definitely than some of us have in North America. So
What do you think the reason is for Australia and New Zealand being ahead of us on this? Like, is it just because they started adopting it earlier? Or?
I think so, and I think a couple of the platforms came from that direction. One of them being Zero, I think came from that Australia, New Zealand region, and so I think that maybe pushed it along a little bit quicker. But yeah, for whatever reason, they seem to have adopted it sooner than the North American. I'm not exactly sure where Europe is on that, but I know in North America we're lagging.
Right. So,
Um, Go ahead.
oh, go on there.
Yeah, so maybe I'll talk for a moment, Quentin, just about like the importance of cloud accounting and why it matters, if that's all right.
Yeah, for sure, go for it.
So really, when we look at the overall digitization of farms, that's ongoing, and I think we're still in very early days around this, but we're seeing more and more opportunities to bring more processes and more data tracking to the digital environment. The cloud accounting piece, in my opinion, is going to be playing an extremely important role in how effective farms become with using digital networks and data. Um, I think the cloud accounting piece is critical, specifically because we need the financial information needs to be there to be able to help interpret what's going on with some of the other operational data that's being collected. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the in the webinar here. But and I think really, what are the key benefits? Well, it provides more timely info. So me as a business advisor, I want to be able to keep up with what's going on your operation and see if there's cash flow problems coming up. How are we dealing with that? I might need some information so I can run some math on what's changed. We've got a drought happening right now in the prairies. What does that mean? Can we gather some data quickly from you and try to interpret what we need to do to deal with things that are ever changing on your farm? So as a business advisor, I need to see it. Your lenders need to see it quickly to make adjustments in case you needed, to buy another piece of equipment or some land comes up for sale. I think just getting more timely information is one key one. And then the other piece that's really important, I think, around the cloud accounting is the ability for the cloud accounting systems to interact with the other systems that are out there. You can build APIs between the systems so that the data can be transferred back and forth. If you're on a desktop accounting system, you're just not going to have that ability. You're going to be constantly doing exports and conversions, and even in some cases manually bringing information from one side to the other. Whereas if the accounting is on the cloud and these other operational data systems are on the cloud, then they can start talking to each other, and the information uploads are super fast, right?
Right. Another question I guess I had was, what's the people that have converted now or in the process of converting? I know it might be a heavy job at the time, but what about for time saving after the fact? Like once everything is in the cloud and the ability to go back and forth between the producer and yourself, is there could you speak to,
Yeah.
I guess, time saving on the operation?
Yeah, a huge time saving. From the accountant's point of view, the information should be ready fairly quickly after year end. If it's fully up and operational the way it should be. Also, we're not waiting for their customer to bring a disk in for us to load onto our system. We just log in and there it is. So as soon as they tell us it's ready, we can just log in. Away we go. So yeah, there's time savings there. There's time savings. I'll talk a little bit more about the OCR side of it, which provides even more time savings. So if it's all right with you, I'll jump into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other advantages of this is there's a lot of optical character recognition softwares, I guess, that are plugging into cloud accounting. So what that really means is that when you get an invoice from your fuel distributor and you scan that invoice into the system, there's a permanent record now in your bookkeeping of that invoice. And if the system is set up properly, that the software will actually read the invoice and say, well, it looks like fuel from based on the past. It looks like this is a fuel invoice. So they'll pop up an entry for you to say, do you want to post this to your fuel expense? And it makes the accounting go a lot quicker for those who are using the software because it learns over time. All these OCR platforms will learn. And so if you're constantly buying your fuel from Petro-Canada, as it sees Petro-Canada invoices, it's going to start to just assume that that's fuel, and you just got to say yes or no, and away it goes. It posts it to the right account. So huge time savings once the system learns who your suppliers are and kind of where things are, where you're generally coding things. It just starts to anticipate for you.
Yeah, some common trends.
Yeah. And then I guess in addition to that, as these documents are being scanned, now as an accountant, if I'm going in and looking at the records and I want to see a transaction, I click on that transaction, I can click through and see the invoice. And if I'm not really sure if an item's in the right place, I see the invoice and I realize, oh, that was actually, they bought something else from Petro-Canada. It wasn't actually fuel. It got put in the wrong place because they thought it was fuel, right? So I can see the invoice and go, oh, we got to make a correction. It's got to be, that's got to be posted somewhere else.
Right, so you have the ability to do that as well as the producer.
Yeah, and I'm not going through a big box of records, flipping through invoices, going, "Where's this invoice?" Right?
Keeps everything a little more everyone on top of things a little bit better.
That's right.
Unless you have anything else on that, I guess we could probably move into the next option here. We got data collection and ownership. Pretty big topic.
Sure.
So we could probably launch some polls here to start off again if everybody wants to move into the next one. Let's go. Let's start with this one. So I'll give everyone a few seconds here to answer the poll, and then we'll pull that back up again. So are you collecting operational data less than 25%, 25 to 50%, 75, 75 to 100? Everyone a little faster on this one. We got 2 more polls coming after this too, so if everyone wants to be ready for those as well. Let's leave it at that for now. So this is on everyone collecting operational data. So kind of what you thought, a little bit different. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, it's lower than I thought. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. Some of you might be collecting operational data and you don't even realize it. But interesting. Did you want to launch that other poll as well before we get into it?
Oh, just did that. Already pulled that one. Let's go. Oh, here we go. No, sorry, you're having some poll troubles here.
Well,
which one do you want to pull up here?
I think we were going to ask if why people don't use.
Why aren't? Here we go.
The data. Yeah, just curious if, for those of you, I guess, who don't find it useful or aren't using it, why don't you use it?
A few more seconds here. A few more answers in, and then we'll pull this one up. Yeah, looks good to me.
Yeah, that one doesn't surprise me at all. That's I knew it was either going to be number one or number four. Um, so not surprising. And the operational data space, to be blunt, is absolutely overwhelming. Um, I've been playing around in this for about 2 years now. Um, I haven't done a lot of playing around as a producer. I've done more of it as an accountant and as somebody who's interested in trying to up my game and get more educated on this space. But as you look at the landscape of all the different platforms that are out there and all the different things you can do with technology on your farm to collect data and be able to analyze it and whatnot, I don't know what the number is, but when you start to dig into it, I'm guessing there's several hundred, if not 1,000, different things out there that you can look at.
We actually got a question here from the audience, so maybe we should have started off with this. It's just asking, please
Sure.
define operational data. Maybe we could have started with a brief overview
Oh, good,
there.
good question. So operational data, when we started on the cloud accounting piece, we talked about that's really financial data. Operational data is more collecting things on your farm. Like the simplest would have been yield monitors. Those of you who've had yield monitors for years in your combines, that's collecting operational data, right? Yield per acre information. It could be data being collected to use for precision ag, where you're doing variable rate applications of fertilizer. It could be data that you're collecting if you have a dairy and you're collecting data on the amount of milk per animal, or how many times if you've got a robotic milking system, how many times the animal keeps trying to go into the robot, and your systems are designed to kick them out if they try to go too many times, right? So it's more the day-to-day operations side, and not necessarily a financial piece of information, but an operational piece of information. Traceability would be another example of operational data tracking. What did you do to grow your crop? Did you put any chemicals on? Did you use any fertilizers? You're tracking all sorts of operational pieces of information. What date did you seed it? What date did you spray it? What date did you harvest it? Those are all pieces of information that we would consider operational data, or at least in my definition of operational data.
Right. And on the traceability side, I think you had a pretty good example when it comes to traceability on the farming.
Yeah, so when we look at why do we care about operational data, or any data for that matter? The one thing that we're noticing for sure that is we as producers are going to get more pressure put on us to provide information is on the traceability piece. And best example I can give you, and I have lots of them, but this is the one that comes to mind, top of mind, is if you're growing potatoes, for example, and you're supplying a company like Pepsi, or in their case, Pepsi owns Frito-Lay. If you're going to supply potatoes to Frito-Lay, Frito-Lay wants to know information on how those potatoes were produced. They need a certain amount of data so that they can be able to track that and report back to their customers as to, when you're buying a bag of potato chips, how are these potato chips, how are the potatoes growing for these potato chips? And if Frito-Lay wants to be able to say that those potatoes are growing sustainably, or they're organic, or all of those different things, they need to have the ability to trace that back to prove that those potatoes were grown in such a manner that they can make that statement on their packaging and on their marketing, right? So I think as producers, that's one example. Another one I should have mentioned as well is Quaker. Anybody who's growing oats in Canada, Quaker is making a push to say that their oats are sustainably grown oats. So as a producer, you're going to get more pressure on you to be able to sign off to say that you take care of your land and you farm in a sustainable manner, and you don't you're not draining wetlands to grow your oats on and stuff like that. Those are another example of traceability data that companies that are buying our product as producers, they're buying our product, they want that information because they need it for proving to their customer that they're selling a product that they say they are.
We actually had another question come in here if you want to tackle that one too. Is operational data a place slash business opportunity for consultants? Cost sensitivity considered.
Um, I guess or would they be asking about using that data? I'm guessing they're asking about using the data.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so absolutely. I mean, whether you're, and it depends on what kind of a consultant you are. If you're talking about financial consulting, absolutely. Um, we'll talk about that in the third pillar of today's discussion, as bringing it all together. Um, but even if you're a consultant, you might be consulting on non-financial matters on the farm. So maybe you're just somebody who wants to bring more structure to a farm in terms of how efficient the farm is run. And helping the farmer understand that you got to have things organized in a certain way or whatnot. There's groups out there, and we do some of that at MNP, where we look at that with businesses to say, make your business more efficient. Doesn't always have to be focused on the financial side. It's more on, are you getting your product through the system quicker, and most effectively. For example, if you were a grain farmer, how many times are you tilling your land? Do you need to till it 5 times, or can you get away with 3 times? And what does that mean for your efficiency? Do you need to swath, or can you straight cut your grain? Um, those types of things, right? So yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity, and I think we'll talk more about that.
Later on.
Another, maybe another quick example on that, Quentin, is on the efficiency piece. There's a program out there. There's a company out there called Verge that has a program called Whipcord. I mean, they'll program right into your combine, tell your combine where to go. So if you've got 5 combines in a field, it gets a little bit congested out there and nobody really knows exactly where they should be. The computer side of that will tell the driver, go to this line on the GPS and cut this line. And then it tells them when they get to the end, go to this line. And it's trying to make sure that it limits the amount of distance that the combine travels as it's harvesting the field. And if you got 5 combines in a field, you can end up with a bunch of people running around looking for a place to cut, if they're not organized. So just stuff
Right.
like that.
Cost savings on fuel and maintenance, that kind of stuff too, right?
Yep. Was there another question at
That
this
was
point?
it. That's all we got there for right now. So if there's
I
anything on top on this
I
topic.
think just on the operational data side, like the one thing I think we want to point out on this is it is overwhelming, and therefore, I think as producers, you need to think about biting it off in pieces and take it kind of one. It is like eating we'll call it like eating an elephant, right? Like you're gonna have to bite on a little piece at a time and work your way through that. And so trying to go fully into it all at once is going to be overwhelming for you as a producer. So
Yeah, and
um,
that was a big part of that. Why aren't you using your data poll there? 45% said simply I don't have time.
yeah, yeah, and I think we'll talk a bit more about that in the third pillar as well. All right, I guess we could just mention it now. Like if you're gonna do this, especially on some of the operational platforms that are out there. So there are many of them that are out there, but there's some that are moving ahead faster than others. And so when we've looked at a number of them, we've looked at Conservice, we've looked at Ag World, Granular, Decisive, Farmer's Edge. Those are some of the examples of them, and they're all the same, but they're all different as well. They all have different benefits that they focus on or bring. But all of those ones, that are a farm management platform where you're trying to bring and house operational data, combine that maybe with some financial data, and look at bringing stuff together. They take time, and if you as the producer, want to do that on your own, you're going to have a different mindset. You're probably not going to spend a lot of time driving the combine or driving the tractor. You're going to spend more time on the computer, and I guess if that's what you want to do as the business owner, then great. But if that's not going to work for you, especially I think if you're a producer that's running a 5 or 10,000 acre grain farm or a large cattle operation, you probably don't have that kind of time in your day if you're out managing human capital and whatnot. So you're probably going to want to find some help to do that. And so if the data is important to you and you want to track it, and you think it's going to be useful for your farm, which I believe it will be, then you need to invest in having some staff around that are going to help you with the data collection and the management of it, or you're going to have to contract somebody out. You might only need somebody for 1 day a week, so you can look at service providers who can do that for you on a contract basis. Another thing I would just say is, I said that on the first poll, some of you probably don't even realize you're collecting data. So, if you've got a GPS system in your machines, chances are you're collecting some sort of data through that system. And if you're signed up with John Deere, for example, there is data being collected on your John Deere equipment, whether it's the machine data that how many RPMs you're running the tractor at, or how many hours it's been since an oil change, or whatever the case might be. There's data being collected on all of that stuff. Same would go with any other machine data collection platform like Climate Field View or any of those. I mean, they're all collecting information if you're using them, even if you're just planning to use it for an auto steer purposes. There's probably data being collected there. It's just a matter of whether you choose to use it or not to the full extent that it can be. So,
right. On that, I mean, if you want to move on to kind of our third and final pillar here, we're going to talk like integration of the data. So bringing it together, the financial and the operational piece.
Yeah, for sure.
On that, we got a few polls later on, but we'll just give it an overview here, I guess, and get into it after.
Yeah, so I've alluded to this a little bit when we were talking in the previous pillars, but from my point of view, as I sit back and look at this as a business advisor and as a producer myself, where I see the big value coming is when we start to bring both the financial and the operational data together. And that's a tough thing to crack. There's a lot of different organizations out there trying to do it right now. I don't think anybody has it solved, not that I'm aware of, at least. We're getting closer in a lot of areas, but it's still a bit of a mystery as to how to get that operational data combined with the financial data, so you can do some analysis to say, hey, you know what, I'm doing variable rate fertilizer applications. What's my benefit of that, right? Like, do I know exactly how much more money I'm making because I'm doing that? That's a tough one to get the information pulled together and be able to analyze it, and analyze it in a way that's not hypothetical. So you can look at it right now and say, well, I saved this much on fertilizer and I think my yield was this much more, and so you can do some math, but what other implications did it have on the farm, and what do the real books tell you? Because at the end of the day, there really is only one set of books that is your financial statement, and those are the ones that matter, right? You can do all you want on the other side with saying, oh, it did this or did that, but if it doesn't tie back to the actual financial outcomes of the operation, it's not as effective, right? So we've got a lot of companies working together to try and do this. There's some collaboration going on in the ag data space between accounting firms and platforms that are out there collecting data, and I think it's going to get better, and it's moving fast, but we still have a ways to go. There a couple of the other things, I guess, that's holding it up. I think that your poll that you did to start the day today, the cloud accounting needs to go faster, because that is going to hold it back from being really effective. So that's on both producers and the accountants to get going quicker on the cloud accounting piece. And then I mentioned that there is collaboration going on, but in many cases there isn't probably enough of it going on. Because you got to, I can understand it. If I was involved in a startup of any of the companies that are out there, you don't only want to share so much because you're trying to protect your own ideas, right? So I think that's holding a bit of it back as well. Is the information sharing maybe isn't as good as you one might like to see it as a producer, and the APIs maybe aren't all there yet that we would like to see, so that the different platforms talk to each other. But I think over time we're going to see more consolidation in the space, and as that happens, that'll be a good thing for getting more of the companies talking to each other, and the development will happen quicker if we can get that going on. So yeah, and then the other piece of it I'll just mention is, as we get financial data and operational data more linked up, that's where the things like benchmarking become way more powerful. And I'm not going to talk any more about benchmarking in this segment, because we do have a special segment coming up next time on your next podcast to basically talk specifically around benchmarking. So, for those of you in the audience, if you do have questions around benchmarking, I would encourage you to sign up for that session, and they'll get way deeper into the topic over there. Do you want me to talk a bit about the cost?
Yeah, I think we get into cost, and then we have a few polls that we'd like to launch too. So yeah, go for cost for a bit. And then if anybody has any questions, again, you can type them in the questions tab, and we can jump on top of those too.
Yeah, so some of you answered the poll question that it was a cost issue that was holding you back, and I think the cost is a real. I mean, it's not even just the cost of getting onto some of the platforms or the softwares that are available, but it's also, what does it mean to have that in your farm, and who needs to be involved in your farm and helping you run that. So if you want to be moving your farm forward and increasing your ability to collect data and then use that data to your advantage, you're going to have to be willing to invest some time and some money to do that. And the money piece, it ranges. It depends on what you're looking for. So some things are, a few hundred, or even the low $1,000s, and there's other things out there that are going to cost you, several $1,000s to get access to the platform or the software. But that's not the only cost. I mean, as I said, if you want to go on some of the farm management platforms like a Conservice or a Granular, for example, and you want to really take full advantage of those, there's some time commitment to that stuff, right? And I think those are great platforms that people are finding value in and want them, but you do, as the producer, need to spend some time with it. It doesn't just, there's no easy button, and things don't magically just appear and give you reports. You have to actually spend some time to make sure the data is coming in, make sure it's cleaned up, and make sure it makes sense. And then once you've got a good set of data in there, then those reports will spit out and provide you that information. So when you're figuring out the cost, you need to think about, will I need to hire somebody to help me run this on my farm? If you're a larger farm and maybe you've got a controller on the farm, look at that person as being an option for you to help you run some of these platforms and help you with the data collection. And if you don't have that, then look for external providers to come out and help you maybe one day a week or something like that to run that platform. But that is going to be a cost as well, because most producers, I would say, are not going to want to spend significant amounts of hours of their week dealing with this. They have a full plate every day, just kind of keep the wheels turning on the operation.
I guess one thing it kind of comes to mind for me, like you talked about a lot of different, I guess, platforms that different people can use on their operations. What's the ease about bringing it together? Like, is there something third party where we can bring the financial and the operational together, or are we looking to kind of house it all in one, whatever they choose, I guess, platform they choose?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the silver bullet is just not there yet.
Yeah.
But you know, in the environment we're in right now, if you're on one of the cloud platforms for accounting, like Xero or QBO, for example, um, I think Ag Expert Cloud is coming up to speed on some of that as well. Those those platforms, if you're on there, you can get them talking to, you know, some of the other platforms, whether it's your John Deere and your climate platform, or whether it's your Ag World and Conservis platform, Granular, whatever you're on that side. You can get them talking to each other right now, and you know, through APIs that are designed to bring the information back and forth. Not all of them talk to each other, so you got to do some investigation into if you've chosen QBO, you know, you got to make sure, well, does QBO talk to these other ones, and it might dictate which one you pick on the operational side. But you know, you're still in a process of pulling data from one side into another and then trying to do some analysis. And I guarantee you there will still be Excel spreadsheets at some point that are involved where you're exporting to get it to where you need to be. I think the long-term goal is not to have Excel spreadsheets. I think the long-term goal is to get stuff brought together so that you can generate the reports you want on a web-based platform.
The death of Excel spreadsheets. What a
It's not
question.
that they're bad. It's just that it becomes more clunky
Yeah,
when you get over there and subject to now you have to save documents and stuff. Whereas if everything's in the cloud, it's just always there. You just can pull it whenever you want, right?
exactly. Yeah, we had another question come in here, just about APIs. So who's developing the APIs? Software vendors, ag experts, equipment suppliers, or third party?
Yeah. So typically from my experience, it's the vendors themselves will look to put together their APIs between whatever platforms they want to talk to. So we don't do any of that at MNP that I'm aware of. There might be third-party providers out there that are tech companies that do specifically just generate API modules, but as far as I know, it's got to be a decision made by, you know, just throw it in examples. If climate wants to talk to Conservis, well, they have to get together and decide, are they going to make that happen, and then their tech people, my understanding, make that happen. So unless somebody else can clarify that for me, that's how I understand it works.
I guess, yeah, it's just a good point because I mean that first poll was, are you transitioning your accounting to the cloud right now? And there's a lot of people that still weren't. So I guess that's something that's a good place to start, is at least deciding what platform would work best on your operation and who's talking, right? So
Yeah.
um, I guess one thing, how about we could probably get into data ownership a little bit if you want to go down that road.
Yeah, I mean, around data ownership, you know, this is a touchy one. And do you
Maybe
want
I
to do
could,
the poll
I could launch
first?
a poll. Yeah, I could launch a poll
Yeah.
here. Everyone's pulling up another poll here for everyone to click on. Give a few seconds here to answer.
So Quentin, when this poll is over, let's just speak to that, and then we can do those other two poll questions after.
Sure, yeah. We're about 50% answered here. If we get a few more answers through, then we'll close it up. That looks probably good now. So yeah, how passionate are you about the ownership of your data? 60% said they're willing in certain situations. Around 30 is a deal breaker. I have to own it. 12, I don't care. Is that kind of how
Yeah,
you
and
thought it was going out?
yeah, I think that's encouraging, that poll. You know, I think to me the right answer is, how I would answer that is number two, with the one with 60%. You know, I think you need to be, if you want to get the benefits of data, you're going to have to be willing to share it. You can't, if you're going to hoard it and not allow anybody else to see it, you're not likely going to benefit from it. So, you know, maybe an example of that, of data sharing, people go, well, why do I need to share my data? The example I always use is Google Maps. So most people have used Google Maps, especially if you you're from the farm and you drive into the big city, the first thing I bring out is Google Maps to say, okay, I need directions as to where I'm going. What Google Maps is doing is it's tracking everybody's cell phone. And so the reason that Google Maps knows that there's a traffic jam on the Deerfoot in Calgary is because there's 1,000 phones sending a signal saying they're all sitting on the Deerfoot. They can't move. It's telling you to take a different route because you're just going to end up in a big jam of traffic, right? So I think that's a good example of, if you're in the agriculture space too, if you want to get benefits out of data, you're going to have to share some of it so that you can get access to other people's data. And when we say access to other data, I don't think anybody's got any desire to share specific data. So as a producer, if you put your data into a system, it's not like you're gonna see, 50 of your peers, you're gonna see their specific data. It's gonna be more, the data is gonna be more consolidated, and you're gonna see some trends. You're gonna see, well, maybe the top 10 producers in that group, this is kind of where their metrics are, and the average group is about here, and then you start to see where you sit amongst that group.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We had a question come through here, more of, I guess, a statement maybe, and I could get some takes from you on this. So I agree the need for data, and most producers have a lot of data in their head, but give me some solid in-field benefits of combining these many areas of data. So I guess, what do you think are top 5 benefits of starting to use your data more effectively on the farm?
Well, top 5. I'll maybe tackle top 2.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, if you have no idea where you're going wrong in your operation, first of all, you'll never have an opportunity to improve, right? So if you're doing something different than everybody else, how are you going to know that unless you've got the information available to you to show you that you're doing that, right? Me as a business advisor, I can't. If you show up to me and you say, I want some business advice, the first thing I ask you for is, can I see your financial information? If you don't have financial information, if you say, well, I don't have any, I don't do financials. Maybe you probably still file a tax return because you have to, but I don't have any financials. I can't help you if I don't have any information to know how you're performing, right? Same thing goes for operational data. If you feel like your fertilizer expense is too high and you want to get into precision ag, you need to have information to be able to show, well, where are you going to place your fertilizer? Are you going to put it on your best ground, or are you going to put it on the sandy ground, or you know what I mean? So I think all of this stuff plays into that, and you got to be collecting that information. You got to be looking at it. You got to look at yield maps. You got to look at where you're putting your efforts in on the farm. And you're going to find, when you get into the deep levels of this, you're going to find acres on your farm that you just shouldn't see, period. Like, you just shouldn't go there because it's just not going to produce a profit for you. It doesn't matter. You can say what you want about spreading the equipment costs over more acres, but if those acres aren't producing a positive gross margin, that's going to be, you're going backwards, right? So I think from a financial point of view, that's why you need to be collecting this information. You need to start bringing it together so we can get deeper into the analysis. Because me, as your business advisor, I can only tell you, well, your gross margin isn't very good on your farm. I have no idea why that is until I go deeper into the information. It might be because you had bad weather. It might be because you spend too much on fertilizer. But until we start digging down into the layers as to, well, what's making up your gross margin, I can't get into any sort of detail around starting to advise you on maybe making some changes, right? And I need to work together with your agronomist. Your agronomist needs a bunch of that information to be able to look at it and see where things are going right and where things are going wrong in that regard. So I see that as being the one thing. And then, and that ties into benchmarking. Like, if we really want to do good benchmarking in agriculture, you got to be collecting really good quality information. And so, I hear people talk to me all the time about, well, what did your canola run? And somebody else say, well, yeah, mine ran 60 bushels to the acre, and mine ran 40, and mine ran 50. But what does that mean? Like what I would expect people to tell me is that their canola run 57.4 bushels to the acre. We got to get to that level of collection, right? And you're not going to maybe get there on the combine monitor, but if you're scaling all of your canola and your scale is calibrated and you're factoring in any moisture adjustments that you need to, you can get pretty close on your yield, right? Moisture and dockage adjustments on there, you can get pretty close on what your yield was. But you got to be going to that level, right? You got to have a scale on your grain cart, or you got to have a scale on your farm that you're bringing the trucks across when you're putting that canola into storage off the combine. So those be a couple examples, I guess. But there's lots, folks. Like there's tons of benefit to tracking and having access to good data information. We talked about traceability being another one. Like think about it this way: if you're an oat grower and Quaker comes along and there's too many oats out there, so that there's more oats in the market than what the demand is. If your neighbor is tracking all the data and has the information that Quaker's looking for and you aren't, who are they going to buy the oats from? They're going to buy them from the neighbor, right? Because that's what they want, right? Now you get into a situation like this year and there's not enough grain around, they'll buy anybody's grain. I get it, that happens. But if we look at the historical charts on canola or oats or anything like that, we haven't been in situations where we've been short as much as we've been in situations where we had too much. And I think as a producer, you're going to want that competitive advantage to know that you have the information to provide it to those who want to buy it. And hopefully at some point we're getting premiums, right? That's going on in the beef industry now, where beef producers are getting premiums, in some cases at least, for being able to provide more information on how the beef was raised, whether it's all the different things that are being looked at around sustainability, or what the cattle are eating or whatnot. That information needs to be available for you to be able to sell to certain customers.
Another one came in here that I'm not too sure what some part of it is. Maybe you'll have a better idea. Is there a place for true computer simulation in ag, similar to the oil and gas and other industries? What's a true computer simulation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that. I think it would be awesome if we could do that. I think if you have enough data and information that, I'm sure there's maybe people on this call or others that we could have had on this call, I guess, that could better answer that. But I think the technology is if it's not there now, I'm sure it'll go there.
Mhm.
What you need though is if you're going to simulate it, again, it comes back to somewhat of a benchmarking discussion. Like if the soil quality is such, if you know what the weather conditions are going to be roughly on average in an area, and if you know what you've got available for seeds and fertilizers and whatnot, you can probably start to simulate, well, what can the productivity of that acre of land, or that specific quarter section of land, or however you want to look at it, what's the potential productivity of that piece of land on that specific crop, given average weather conditions and a few other assumptions you need to put in there. And then if you can do that, then you can go out and simulate, is my farm viable, right? And
Scale it.
that's where the lenders are going to get real interested, because if they're going to lend you money, they want to know what's the chances this farm actually is going to make money.
Right. That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever thought about it like that before, but I guess this next kind of poll I can bring up leads into our next webinar we have, but I'd just be interested to see what the answers are right now after talking about it for a bit. So would you see value in getting access to financial and or operational benchmarking? Yeah, it's pretty quick. I'll give it a little bit more time here, but it's a pretty overwhelming answer.
Oh, that's good.
100% yes. So,
and really that is one of the key things I think that's going to fall out of data collection, is the better the data we have, the better the benchmarking we can do. Like we've seen some benchmarking work done in the past, and if you're going to benchmark, if you're a potato producer in Tabor, Alberta, you want to benchmark against other potato producers. And if you're in irrigated land, you want to benchmark against probably other irrigated potato producers, right? You don't want to try to benchmark your farm necessarily against a dry land farmer in Saskatoon or a greenhouse grower in Ontario. Like we need that level of information to be there, and we need enough volume of that information to be there to be able to actually provide valuable benchmarking for producers who are in similar industries. And the one thing that's interesting is when you think about data, where my head goes on this is don't let international borders stop you on that piece with data and benchmarking. Because if I'm a grain farmer in Mossbank, Saskatchewan, do I want to benchmark against the guy in Grand Prairie who's grain farming, or do I want to benchmark against somebody in Montana or in North Dakota or maybe Australia for that matter, right? I think that is something that's coming. We're going to see more of that. And I think it's relevant. I think if you're in the dairy sector, you might want to be looking at benchmarking your dairy operation against those in the United States, New Zealand. If you really want to run a good, lean, mean dairy operation, benchmarking against Canada might not always be your best bet. And I think the supply managed thing in Canada can cause some differences in how the numbers look up here versus countries that don't have supply management or in a more competitive environment. You might see some different things that they've done to adapt to the competitive side and pick up on that. And when you're, if you're in a dairy farm in Canada, your revenue is somewhat stable. If you can get you more efficient on how you produce, all of that efficiency gain goes straight to the bottom line. So that's those are some things I think people some incentives I think people should have for getting better data is to get in there and not only take a look at how you're doing against your peers locally or in Canada, but how are you doing on a worldwide basis. And I think with technology now, worldwide opportunities to benchmark are not going to be that far-fetched.
And I think that kind of speaks back to that other question we had of two back was give me some solid infield benefits, and everybody here wanting benchmarking. Well, the infield benefit was being able to benchmark to your neighbors or anybody else in the surrounding area, right?
Yeah.
What do we got here left? We got another one. Just kind of a wrap up poll, I guess, if we want to get into that too. Launch that one. You want to be contacted by an MMP advisor?
Yeah, and I would say on this front, we're interested in the data piece. We're learning, just like everybody else is, I think, in the space. And so, but we do need producers to work with us on the learning piece because MMP itself is not farming. So I think those of you who are interested and early adopters of this, it's probably not going to be easy. I'm not going to lie to you. It's gonna take some time and some commitment, and sometimes it won't be a lot of fun. But I think the quicker you get onto this, the better off you'll be in the long run. Because I really do honestly believe this. I honestly believe this is where it's going. We are going to have more digitization of operations, and I think the demands are going to be put on us as producers to provide more information so that we can tell a story around how was our livestock raised on the farm, how was our grains produced, our vegetables produced, all of those things. We're going to need to tell that story in the long run. That is where things seem to be shifting, and I think the technology that's out there it's just a tool or an option for us to help us collect and consolidate and put the information together to make it better or more easily accessible. And then what can we learn from that information to better the financial performance of our farm is where it gets even more interesting, right? So not only are we able to tell our buyers in China or India or wherever they are, how we produced it, but we get some information that we can then take a look at ourselves in the mirror and say, how are we doing as a business? And where are our opportunities for improvement on the business?
I guess we could do one more thing here. Kind of wrapping up here. So if anybody else has any questions in the audience, feel free to type them there. But do you have kind of a silver bullet question you want to ask, and maybe they could type some answers in, like you could design one silver bullet here. What's it going to include for ag data?
Yeah, we're asking the participants for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And maybe while they're answering that question, I'll say one thing. If you pick one thing alone, if you haven't done any data collection or started down that road, if you're a grain producer or a cattle producer for that matter, if you can pick one thing, focus on your inventory. And by inventory, I mean production inventory. So focus on your grain if you're a grain producer, and focus on your cattle if you're a livestock producer. That is the number one thing that causes us accountants grief. Is we get to the end of the year and we sit down to work with you on how much grain do you have, how much did you produce, and how much is in the bins. And it's always a challenging area to work through, but there's lots of good things out there, whether it's Agromatics with their system. I know there's a number of other ones out there that are grain cart scale systems that track the grain as it comes in. There's, Conservice has a way of measuring it from their system. I think Farm at Hand has one as well. Like, get on something that's allowing you to better track your grain inventory, because getting that information to your accountant makes our lives a lot easier when we start trying to do reporting, both for your financial reporting and for things like agri-stability and whatnot. I think that's one step you can take as a baby step. Was there any questions, Quentin, that came through, or comments?
Nothing yet. No. So yeah, if nobody else has any questions, then we're probably good here for now, unless you got anything you want to add, Stuart. That's still on. All good on your side too. I do have one more thing to add here. If you have any further questions after this presentation, feel free to reach out to Stuart. His email is stuart.person@mmp.ca. Before we end today, we're going to give you a chance to collect your CCA CEU in professional development. To collect the credit for this webinar, please open your CCA app on your smartphone and click scan course code. So I'll share my screen here to pull up that. There's that. You should be able to scan. Hold your phone up to the monitor, and camera can hover over the QR code. Doing this, you'll be able to submit it immediately. If it does not work for you, please email your first name and last name and CCA number to topcrop@annexbusinessmedia.com. We'll submit it for you. Follow-up email will be sent out within 24 hours, which will hold the recording of the webinar and our email address for any feedback, questions, or to submit your CCA information. Thanks for tuning in today to today's webinar, and don't forget to visit topcropmanager.com/webinars to view all our recorded webinars and register for upcoming ones. Okay, well, I think that's good.